cloud. All right, I did it. Hooray. And then let me share my screen. Oh, this I should have done first. I apologize. Oh my, oh man, where'd my screen go? Oh, there we go. I promise I know how to do things. All right, hooray. Hopefully everyone can see that.
Yes, I can see part of it. It looks like,
Is that
yep.
okay? Cool. Thank you. Okay, so today I wanted to talk about carbs because they're literally my favorite macro, and they still, even though people are starting to eat them again, they still get demonized. But I love that like millennial women spent most of their life being told to be afraid of carbs, and now everyone's on the sourdough baking kick. It's my favorite thing. Like it's a good middle finger to diet culture. But I think carbs get a really bad rap because they get associated with bloating. They get associated with being tired. They get associated with why you can't lose fat. Oh, let me put headphones in. But realistically, it's like the context in which you eat them. And a lot of times, not having not having carbs could be the thing that holds you back. And I know for myself personally, like I would cut carbs and I just felt like I would lose weight or the scale number would go down, but I would just be like a melted candle feeling. Like nothing felt solid. It was just a smaller version of my bigger self. And so once I started to implementing carbs and then really push into the threshold of how much I could actually eat, my body composition changed, my energy changed, my hormones felt better, like my sex drive was through the roof, if everyone wanted to know that. And so if you feel like you're lower in energy, if you feel like you don't have a sex drive, you feel like your periods, are really negative part of the month, or like you're spinning your wheels in the gym, it could be carbs. And I know like a lot of times we think carbs could be the thing that's making us gain weight, when in reality, they do help, they store water. If you eat a bunch of carbs, you get on the scale the next day, like you're gonna see an increase on that number, but that's not necessarily fat. That's our body holding on to glycogen, that's our body holding on to water weight. A lot of times if it's a heavy training, it could be inflammation from the training. But in on the flip side of that, the reason when you cut carbs, you automatically see that number come down is not also because you're losing that water weight, but a lot of times we go from eating very palatable, easy to overindulge in carbs, and then you go to veggies, lean proteins, fat sources, you're going to see that come down. So it's a lot of times it's the food quality when we just see that drastic weight change with cutting carbs. And then I know a lot of people feel like carbs can cause some bloating, or you feel like it's that like midsection, and hey, sometimes it does. Like I'm not going to say carbs can't do that because they do retain water, but if you've been eating low carb for a while and you start to put in a whole bunch of carbs, you're going to feel that right in your midsection. If you're eating a heck of a lot of like raw veggies, that's going to also, not that that's really like a huge carb source, but you're going to feel that particularly in your gut. Um, or or even whereas like all carbs turn into sugar, but if you're eating more of like your high sugar fruits, you might feel that a little bit more in bloating. And so it's about strategically increasing your carbs if you've been eating lower amounts, and just kind of adding in like, hey, let me add in 10 grams a day. Let me try like 30 grams a week, but staggering it throughout the week and really structuring your carbs around your training. Um, I would say upwards of like 60% pre and post training will really help with any of that bloat, or even like with the next one with the insulins. Like, a lot of times we feel like carbs are going to cause these insulin spikes. They're going to cause energy crashes, which naked carbs will. If you eat carbs by themselves, yeah, you're probably going to get some insulin spikes. You're going to get energy crashes. And just on the other side, insulin, to spike our insulin is not really inherently a negative thing. Again, it's always in the context. But if you pair it with fats, you pair it with protein, you're going to have this even stable energy throughout the day. And one of the big things with cutting carbs, which I didn't realize like when I was doing it, obviously, but the stress it can take on your body, because carbs are the shut off switch for the cortisol, which is our stress hormone. And so when we completely omit those, your body can constantly feel like she's just in fight or flight and she's fighting against herself, as well as like everything we deal with throughout the day is a perceived threat. And that's on the other side. Like if you are always in this state of stress, if your body's always in fight or flight, always trying to survive, like the last thing on your mind is going to be reproduction. And that's why your sex hormones will tank and you just don't feel like your vibrant, wonderful self all the time. But pairing your carbs with protein and fat is imperative for stabilizing your energy, because your body's going to burn through those carbs very quickly. So having those other two macros make it so that we do it a little bit slower, or the body digests the carbs a little bit slower. Um, Carbs kill fat loss. They don't. Overindulging in food is what kills fat loss. Just having an abundance of any food will cause fat gain. But realistically, carbs are the body's preferred energy source. And so I think, what is it? Our brain needs like 100 grams, 120 grams of carbs. Don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. But it's when we're in this constant state of low carb and your body needs carbs to feel optimal. And then we're just not fueling our workouts. We're cutting into our muscle. We're cutting into our metabolism. And we go into this cycle of just constantly feel like we need to do more, we need to cut more, I need to eat better, when realistically having the carbs in, you're going to be able to fuel your workouts, you're going to be able to fuel your muscle. Your body's not going to think, okay, well, I should get rid of this muscle because there's nothing actually feeding it. And you're fueling the goals a whole heck of a lot more. Carbs make us crave more carbs. If you eat carbs by themselves, and I hear that all the time, like women will be like, I'll eat a banana for breakfast and then I'm just ravenous all morning. Well, you eat the banana, your body's gonna, I think, but for every 100 calories of carb, like the thermogenic effect of carbs is like 3%. So it doesn't take much to burn through those carbs essentially. Whereas with protein, for every 100 calories, I think it's like 30% of those are burned through just trying to digest that. So it takes a lot more work to burn through protein. So if you eat carbs by themselves, yeah, you're gonna be craving more energy all throughout the day. Your body's just using that fuel and wanting the next, wanting the next. And so again, pairing that with protein, pairing that with fats is gonna make adding carbs into your day a heck of a lot easier. And then I always hear, and then this is more from like the carnivore kind of narrative, or even like the low carb narrative, that carbs aren't necessary. And while like you can 100% live without carbs, like you can't live without protein, you can't live without fat, you can live without carbs, but you're not going to be thriving. You're not going to be living in this optimal space. Your libido is going to tank. You're going to feel stressed. I've seen people build muscle. I think most of the people I've seen build muscle when it comes to low carb spaces are men, and they have all that wonderful testosterone, so things are a little bit different for them. Um, but so with the myths that are out there, and that's like we just get told all these negative things about carbs, and realistically fear sells. And in the 80s, it was the low fat, and then it got transitioned into the low carb. And again, you pull carbs from your diet, and if you're pulling over processed, highly palatable foods from your diet, and switching over to a, lean protein vegetable space, you're gonna lose weight. You're not going to be eating as many calories. But you can have carbs in your diet. We just have to structure them in, and we have to make sure that there's a balance of all the things. And if the goal is fat loss, that you're eating in a deficit of all the macros put together. But one of my favorite things about carbs is how it can truly just lower stress in your body. It can calm your nervous system by lowering your cortisol. And so then in turn, you're also going to be able to make more melatonin. My brain just spaced on that word. You're going to be making more melatonin. So not only are you going to lower stress, but you're going to get better sleep. And so if you find yourself in this, like, I'm wired but tired at night, I'm up at 2, 3 in the middle of the night, just kind of thinking, and you are someone that eats lower in carb, it might be a time to start looking at structuring more carbs into your day. And I'm not saying like, let's go hit up Krispy Kreme and eat a dozen donuts. Sweet potatoes are whole grains. Fruits are another great one. They're just filled with fiber. Potatoes, I'm a huge fan of the potato. But we add more carbs in, we're lowering our cortisol. Our brain doesn't think we're in fight or flight all day. Like traffic isn't going to send our nervous system through the roof. We're going to feel a little bit more at peace. And then the other side, if we're always in fight or flight, our body's not going to be able to build muscle. We're going to just constantly be stressed. And then you exercise and you're adding more stress. So adding more carbs in will not only just help with your goals physically, but internally you're going to feel a heck of a lot better. And then lowering your cortisol will in turn is going to help your sex drive. And that's not only do we need fuel to help create reproductive hormones. And like one of the best analogies was when I was in nutrition classes, and like the nervous system doesn't understand stress from today versus like 200-300 years ago. And 300 years ago, stress was a lion chasing you and trying to eat you. And if you're being chased by a lion, you're being chased by a bear, the last thing on your mind is, I need to lose weight or I want to have sex. And so when we're always stressed, our body's not going to want to lose weight. It's not going to thrive with its sex hormones. And it's not just like about having a sex drive, but it's also, if we don't have a sex drive, our sex hormones aren't working properly. And if your estrogen, your progesterone, and testosterone aren't in optimal places, everything else is going to start to also not be in an optimal place. So realistically, carbs are like the green light for your body. If we think about it from an evolutionary standpoint, if you're able to eat an abundance of carbs, like we're in a season, like they're a seasonal fruit. So if you're constantly eating carbs throughout the year, your body's like, okay, we're safe. There's an abundance of food. You're just in this good space, and the nervous system can understand that. I don't know if I explained that right. My brain, it made sense in my brain, but um, so it's really about living in this optimal space, living in this space where your body thrives, and trying to feed into that. And then I know I've said it a few times, but carbs, they help build muscle. Um, and not only does, like, so you do eat carbs, the scale will go up. You'll see that little bit of glycogen spike. Sometimes we might feel bigger. It's your body holding, or your muscles holding on to the glycogen in the water, but we create these energy stores in our muscle. And so while you're training, your body's able to pump out energy and continue to supply yourself through the training. Um, and while like there's another thought of like, hey, we want to burn fat during training, it's not the same kind of concept. And by putting on more muscle, you're going to end up burning fat through that. So if the goal is to lose fat and you haven't spent some time building muscle, leaning into that's going to give you it's a heck of a lot better return on your investment for yourself. Um, and like I said, I know when I tried to lift, or I was trying to lose weight by cutting carbs, I just felt like this soft, doughy version of myself. And it wasn't until I really pushed into the carbs, and like there was a space where I was eating probably like 80, 60, 50 grams of carbs. And then when I was really low carb, and then I started to lean into those carbs, and it was like mind blowing. I could eat 180 grams and 250, and now I'm somewhere at like 290 most days. And it's incredible what your training looks like, what your endurance looks like, and just overall what my mood and like the brain fog's gone. Also, like, like when we don't eat, we don't have carbs, we get that hangry, you get snappy at everybody. And so it's just your body feels so much better when we're fueling at this appropriate place with the carbs.
I noticed like the biggest
Oh,
thing I noticed with having adequate carbohydrates is my training sessions, not only like my results, right? Being able to better build muscle, but just how I feel mentally, like wanting to train, wanting to
mhm.
push that extra rep, wanting to add more weight on the bar. I don't feel so depleted. So I think that's a big one. And even an opportunity to consider like intra-carb supplements as well. Like, are you training more than an hour? Maybe at that 45-minute mark, try having some carbohydrates and see how your training feels. Like, you'll probably feel even better. So especially if you're noticing that energy is low in your training sessions, and maybe you train early in the morning, don't want to have a lot of food, an intra-carb workout supplement could be a really good idea for you too.
That's a really good point. That's what I like work with a lot of clients on, is just trying to find those carbs you can eat first thing in the morning, because it is hard. Most of us don't eat breakfast, or have been taught to not eat breakfast. Um, and if you're doing like the more endurance stuff, like you don't want heavy things in your stomach. That's where I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
let's eat some gummies, let's eat some
Yeah.
applesauce or honey. And
I hate drinking my food, but like sometimes in that case, like you want fast fuel, and so
mhm.
and you don't always feel like eating, right? Especially if you're going to do anything with high intensity. So that can be really helpful. And there's really good options out there too, with just like pretty simple ingredients, or even as simple as like I love applesauce too. This brings me back to my CrossFit days. I haven't done this forever, but a really, really good one that's like easy on the stomach is bake sweet potatoes and like
Mm,
mash them up and then mix applesauce with it and cinnamon. So you have like a little
that sounds
potatoes,
wonderful.
applesauce, cinnamon. It's so good. But yeah, I haven't needed those for a while.
I can imagine your fueling was intense from CrossFit days.
Yes. Yeah, a lot more intense needs on the making sure I was getting enough carbohydrates with my training. Now it's a little easier to manage.
How much
One of
carbs were
my
you
oh, go
eating
ahead.
on your CrossFit days?
I actually don't know how I was like not as much on the tracking, but Definitely my training sessions were 2 hours or 3 if I had like 2 workouts in a day. And so just
Yeah.
making sure I was fueling smart was always a priority there. I did do a lot of those applesauce packets.
I have a gym bag filled of those.
Yeah, yeah. Those like little honey, one of my friends had, now that I'm starting to do train for high rocks, I am considering that again, at least on like my longer sessions, like maybe once a week.
Mhm.
But she had those, well, I actually haven't had them. I've done like that's it. Have you still have those like little fruit things?
Those
They're
are good.
it. I've taken those on long endurance runs, like trail runs, and I like those as well as the even salt. Like that's something to consider. Not we're talking about carbohydrates, but just along the lines of fueling yourself appropriately. There's those salt tabs, especially if you're doing longer endurance sessions. Those can be really helpful as your like electrolytes get depleted. But what are they? They're like the honey, is it honey zingers?
Oh, like the waffle strudel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those
Those
I
are
thought
good.
that looked really good, so that's on my to try list. And they even have like peanut butter flavored ones. Honey Stinger is the brand. So
Okay.
that's on my to try list for intra carbs because I like eating, not drinking if I can help it.
I was doing like orange juice and coconut water mixed together as like a
Oh
pre-workout drink,
yeah.
but I'm a bigger eater than
Yeah.
drinker.
I don't have a problem usually eating and like needing my food to digest or anything.
Mm-mm. Um, that's a good point you said about how you like your desire to want to train. Like your body now has all this energy, and you're like, you know what? I
Yeah.
do want to lift. I do want to push those extra reps. And I was just saying that to my coach the other day. I was like, I was cranking out 35s on a bench press, like it was nothing, and we had just upped my carbs. And it's
Feels
really
so
cool when you
good.
watch that align like in real time for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have a vivid, like Henrietta, I do remember I was CrossFitting and I was really into the paleo diet, 14 years ago. And I was competing in CrossFit, new to CrossFit. And like in the beginning with the paleo diet, like I was obviously eating a lot fewer carbs, not no carbs, but fewer carbs just because I was only getting them from Whole Foods. And I noticed I felt so much better initially, like less inflammation. But then I noticed I felt pretty depleted. And when I switched to tracking macros, somewhere in there, like 2015, and I increased my carbohydrate intake quite a bit. I just remember feeling like, oh my gosh, I've never felt better with my training. And so it's interesting to try different things, but I really think the main takeaway there for me is like I could have kept doing paleo, but like actually been hitting a carbohydrate goal, where before that wasn't a priority. I was probably really high fat, just from a convenience standpoint. But when I started tracking macros, I definitely increased my carbohydrate intake and I felt so much better with my training. So that was something I was very excited about because I think in that time I kind of thought carbs were bad also. Like I was sort of, feeling like fat was the main event for fueling my training.
Hey, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So can you describe to me like what is actual carb cycling? Because I hear a lot about cycling carbs and things like that in alignment with training, or what does that look like?
So, oh, yeah,
No,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
So I think carb cycling is kind of like a general term and it could look a lot of different ways. But when you said around training, so give me an example of that. Like, have you heard people talking about cycling carbs around their training? I just want to make sure I understand the question fully.
Well, I've just heard about it just in general, not just with training, but as a sort of like um just I don't know if it's their lifestyle or I don't know if it's kind of like for to like in a deficit or I'm not
Yeah.
really sure. It's just one thing that I haven't like
Like,
dove in to explore more. And so I didn't know if it was something like you do like so many carbs on one day. Like I didn't know if it was like kind of like a every 3 days or I just wanted to know a little bit more about that.
so carb cycling, I have experimented with, and then I have seen done in many ways. I think it really I guess the first thing I will say is it's not magic. Like there's nothing magic about carb cycling. I think it can be used in fat loss, having high carb days, maybe on your more intense training days, and then cutting back on like rest days is what I've seen. Just really not even to control carbs, but just to control calories. and maybe bring you into a calorie deficit. And they're pulling from carbs because maybe carbohydrates aren't as needed, like on those rest days, to fuel glycogen for training and recovery. In my opinion, I think we still need carbohydrates on our rest days. And so I think for me, it comes down to if you're in a calorie, and then also like maybe if you really wanted to build muscle, like you would add more carbs on training days. But I really don't think like the day that you do more carbohydrates or less carbohydrates, there's no magic to that. Like really, if you're looking across the whole week, calories are going to be the most important. But I think where I think where I think nutrient timing is probably something I would focus more on is getting carbohydrates around your training sessions. That would be something that is going to be more noticeable for you, like as you're training, especially if you're in a calorie deficit and all macronutrients are lower, at least carbohydrates and fats. Then the carbs that you are intaking are going to be kind of crucial, and timing those up around your training, making sure you're going into your training session with full glycogen stores, and then as much as possible, like post-workout to aid in recovery is going to be the most important. For me, I was not a huge fan of carb cycling because on my rest days, like to cut calories from carbs doesn't make sense because if I'm resting, I have more time in the day and I want more food. Like I don't want to cut my calories down typically. So I would rather keep things straight across the board, but some people might feel a lot better in taking fewer carbs on their rest days. Like they just feel like maybe they have better cognition, like they're able to be more focused. I think that really comes down to personal experimentation and like seeing what feels best for you. But I don't think that was something that was really big maybe 10 years ago, and we've kind of there's not as much excitement around carb cycling. And I think that's because the research shows that there's not like a huge benefit from carb cycling. Do you have anything to add, Marita, on that?
No, I agree with all the things you said. I think it'll help sometimes with diet mindset if you have like the days where you have higher carbs. I also think it can be really beneficial if you are trying to improve like insulin sensitivity and things like if you have internal health things going on. But mostly, yeah, stacking most of your carbs around your training day. And I know for me personally, like I don't, even on my rest days, I don't want to not eat carbs. So I'll try and make that as even as possible throughout the week.
But I believe, like, just what I've heard from clients or people that are done a macro consult or a strategy call, is that when they provide me with information from other coaches that they have worked with previously, it's been like they provide me with macros, but not necessarily like I had this calorie goal. It's more like I had these macros, and on these days I had this carb amount. So I think many coaches, at least maybe before, as you said, Michaela, worked like that they were like providing more macros instead of like a calorie target, and then taking from carbs if they wanted to like control. So I think we have more of an approach where, we want you to nail your protein. We have a calorie target. How you want to do with your carbs and fats, it's a personal preference. As long as you're somewhat balanced, that's going to be a personal preference. So I think it's more rigid when you're just taking from the carbs because you might prefer carbs over fats, for example. So, but I think like that's what I assume you have heard where people are talking about, and yeah, that's not our approach, but I think that is a lot of coaches' approach. And then like, it's a way of doing it, but definitely a preference thing. And I would feel it overcomplicates things a little bit also for many people that need that.
It's like we can really get complicated if we want to, but
yeah. And for some that might be very helpful, but not generally. Like it's not needed generally.
The middle gets boring. So sometimes I feel like things are given just to make it seem more exciting.
Yeah, and I think there is like a little bit to be said for some psychological relief. I think that is where carb cycling probably comes into play the most, is if we want you to be averaging 1,600 calories a week and you're in a calorie deficit, then just eating that 1600 calories every single day can feel really challenging mentally for people. So if we can maybe we go to 1500 3 days a week on like your less intense days, and then 4 days a week we're able to go up to 17 or 1800, just to, my math is probably not totally mathing, but we're able to go higher. Then like, okay, today I just have to stay really focused. I'm eating meat and veggies and like it's more calorie cycling, but done through carbohydrates, because maybe we don't need as much energy on those non-training days. Then we're able to just push through, eat lower calories, knowing tomorrow when I'm lifting, I'm going to get those extra carbohydrates, and like, that's going to kind of get me through today. And so I think that is a tool that can be used, but just generally speaking, from my perspective, it overcomplicates things. I think, back when I was in my early 20s and didn't have kids and was just like living to train, but also maybe wanted to lose body fat, like that would be something I would have considered utilizing, where now I would go like, that's way too much calculating for me, and I just want flexibility in my day. I am not even really trying to hit a carb and fat ratio personally. I'm just hitting my calories and my protein. And if I'm noticing, oh, my training sessions are lacking a little bit, I like, my energy is not great, then I'll look back at the week and see like, what was my carb intake? Did I change up my eating? And then that's where I really will look at things and see like, oh wow, I had like very low carbs Thursday, Friday. No wonder Saturday I felt like garbage when I trained. Or vice versa. A lot of times I'll have clients that weight will spike on a Sunday, and it's like, okay, well, let's take a look at your Friday, Saturday. Oh, carbs were double the normal amount. So even though calorie intake was pretty much the same, like you really increased carbs and had like no protein. So that's going to spike the scale. Your body's pulling in a lot more water. So I like to look at carbs and fats and tweak them based on how I'm feeling and how I'm recovering and my food preferences, versus like cycling day to day. Just because it's easier in this stage of life for me. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Definitely something you could play with though, if you're like, yeah, I think like that would be a good way to manipulate my calorie intake. And maybe I don't need as many carbs on these certain days because I'm not doing as much. And I think that is something that can be looked at, and it's not a bad idea. It's just not necessary either if it's not needed. So yeah, well, I think anything else to add, Marita? Helpful.
I know a lot, like if you have insulin issues, if you have PCOS, if you have diabetes, like carbs aren't the thing to be afraid of. Again, it's a way to structure them in, making sure you're pairing them with fiber, and even doing carb cycling with those kind of things can really help improve the what is the word? The symptoms of those things over time, and create it to where you have an environment that is more insulin sensitive. So carbs are just, they definitely are a tool. They're definitely I don't know, one of the things that really changed lifting, changed my physique, just changed things for me across the board. And that's all I got.
Yes. And also I was just going to say, for those that have done the HF Thrive Challenge, congrats. We are done with the 4 weeks. And we'll be talking a little bit more in the group. I'll be announcing the 12 weeks of one-on-one coaching winner. So excited about that. Stay tuned, and we'll just be discussing that in the group today.
Awesome. All right.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.